Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to take a second to introduce myself. I'm the commander of the 82nd Contracting Squadron out at Shepherd Air Force Base. We oversee roughly $1 billion worth of contracts for a variety of services, construction and commodities, supply type items. So with that, the whole intent of this panel today is to give you some free information because our goal is to help people win government contracts. So the panel that I have today, first I'll bring up Mr. Clenard, Bruce Clenard, who works for the Texas Procurement Acquisition Center, the PTAC. And he's out of Lubbock, Texas, and he has years of experience doing this. He's a retired Air Force officer. His goal is to help business owners get started from the ground up. And then next I'll bring up Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder he actually works for me. He keeps the office running, but he's our small business specialist, so he works with all the small businesses in the local area. And then finally, last but not least, we have Ms. Melina Lopez, who actually works she works more the state side. So please have a seat. Yeah. So one of the big takeaways is I know we only got 30 minutes today. That's definitely not enough time. So I'd encourage you to get their information and follow up because part of all the jobs is to do outreach all the time to help out small businesses. So first of all, I'll turn it over to Mr. Clenard. Could you kind of detail some of the services that you provide?
Be happy to. To clarify, the program that I'm part of is not a government agency, exactly. It is a program that's operated by the Department of Defense, and we also get support from each state. We are called Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. If you ever hear the acronym PTAC, that's what I am. Basically, a number of years ago, the federal government came to the realization that federal contracting is so different than doing work in the commercial world that it's next to impossible for small businesses to navigate through all the red tape, to keep up with all the different programs that are out there because you have thousands of agencies, a lot of them having their own unique procedures, and these procedures are constantly changing. So they created our organization. As I said, we are funded in part by the federal government, part by the state. To key on what the lady said just a minute ago, all of our services are free. We're here strictly to promote small business development in West Texas. We are actually part of Texas Tech University, and we work in conjunction with the Small Business Development Center here at MSU when we are working in this area. But I do a lot of work by email, by video conference. What I do is the one-on-one, hands-on work with small businesses to help them get ready to do government contracting. It can be at the local level, it can be at the state level, or the federal level. And the reason we do this is because there are so many opportunities out there. The government recognizes very well that, as several folks have said, small business is the backbone of our economy. It's also essential for our government agencies too. They make a lot of large purchases from large corporations, but in order to function, they have to have supply support services from small businesses. That's absolutely key. And so much so that on the federal level, they have a goal where 23% of all their contracting is supposed to go to small businesses. Now, think about this a minute. They also buy multi-million-dollar airplanes, aircraft carriers, a lot of major purchases. So all that is included in that equation. So they have to compensate for those large purchases by doing a lot of small business contracting. So when the goals get down to like the Shepherd level, they are much higher than that, where they have to really try to do as much work with small businesses as possible. Now, the types of things that I do is I help small businesses really kind of figure out where their market is. One of the things that you have to understand when it comes to government contracting, it is very different from the commercial world. Most of this is driven by the fact that government agencies, local, state, and federal agencies, use public funds. These are appropriated dollars. So they have a lot of rules and regulations that they have to follow to make sure that these funds are used properly and used correctly. Dealing with things like equal opportunity, with fairness, those sorts of things. They also have requirements where they have to try to help certain groups that have been underrepresented in contract awards. Minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, all these different groups. They have special programs that these agencies have to follow where they can give preferences to groups or to businesses that fall in these categories, but they must go through certification processes. So what I do is I work with the small business. I help them get registered where they need to. If they qualify for any of these programs, we help them apply for those certifications. We also have a lot of ways of providing them bid information on government contracting opportunities. If they find a bid that they're very interested in, and if we're available, because we do cover about a 30-county area, if we're available, we'll sit down and walk through that bid package with them. We're not going to tell them what to bid. It's their business. It's not our business. But we want to make sure they understand all the requirements in there. One of the worst things that can happen to a small business is to win a contract, okay? And then find out that there was a lot more involved with the job than what they realized, and so they underbid it. We want to make sure they understand all the requirements so that they can put in a realistic bid. The government doesn't want someone to fold on a contract or lose money on the deal, but they are interested in getting the best deal they can on a contract, but from a qualified contractor. And so we try to help in that area as much as we can. As most of you know, the government moves much slower than society does. They don't really use social media. You're not going to be able to use that to market to government agencies. But I will tell you, I've seen a number of instances where if you have a social media presence, when you bid on a contract, they're going to look at that. They're going to look at your social media presence because one of the things they're trying to assess is your past performance, your expertise. They're trying to minimize as much as possible any risks that might be incurred with awarding you a contract. So they'll look at those things. It won't be necessarily something that they will buy your product or service through, but they will look at that to assess your capabilities, okay? So you want to make sure if you do have a social media presence that you have it up to date, that it's professional, and that it does provide a good representation of who you are and what your capabilities are. But when it comes to actual contracting, they have very strict rules that they have to follow. And you might get frustrated as a contracting officer over something, but in most cases, they are very limited on what discretion they have. They basically are following rules, and you have to understand that. And basically, we are here to help you as much as we can to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Clenard. Mr. Snyder, can you pick up from where Mr. Clenard left off and explain the process of what happens once you get you award a contract to a small business, kind of how we manage it?
Yes. What happens with the government when we give them a contract to a small business, a lot of times we focus on things like performance, but performance can be multi-tiered. The government, unlike other businesses, is we dictate how much you pay your employees if it's a service or a construction project. Many private industries do not. We also have various requirements that are unique to the federal government, and like Mr. Clenard pointed out, reading through those various clauses and specifications that are in a contract are critical to ensure that you perform well. When you perform well, people notice, and they'll come out and try and promote your company for other services. It's the official policy of the federal government to contract with small business whenever practicable, which the government classifies practicable as, we call it the rule of two. There's two small businesses that can perform that service or provide that good at a fair and reasonable price. It's a small business set aside, and the various socioeconomic categories that Congress has set up for us that we have are targeted for specific socioeconomic categories to promote small businesses in our community.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Molina, could you kind of talk about the historically underutilized business office and the services you provide to the state of Texas?
So I work at the Texas Comptroller Public Accounts statewide hub program. And so HUB is historically underutilized business. And so it is a free program for women, veterans, and minority owners that own the business at least 51%. And it is a marketing tool that you can use to do business with the state of Texas or any city or governmental agency. Because all state agencies with a biennium of $10 million are required to make a good faith effort in utilizing hubs in their procurements. And right now it's about, when you submit your application, it's about 6 weeks to process your application. And again, I'm going to use the word free because it is free and it's good for 4-year certification. So that'll kind of open up some doors to help you kind of, I guess, diversify your business in trying to contract with the state of Texas. And so part of my job in the HUB program is a marketing coordinator, and that's my title. And so we have a huge event coming up November the 2nd in Austin. And in that event, we will train you how to do business with the state of Texas, as well as have exhibitors, state of Texas purchasing professionals or procurement professionals available to try to train you or to tell you about what business opportunities they have available. So we do have that event upcoming, and we'd love for you to join us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Before I open it up, could you guys go over some of the pitfalls to avoid when it comes to government contracting? I'll start off with Mr. Clenard.
There's actually a number of pitfalls I think you have to be very careful of. Someone said it earlier in terms of really assessing what your capabilities are. You need to be realistic when you're looking at your business and what your capabilities are, and make sure that when you bid on a contract that you can follow through and complete that job. There's a lot of times with jobs, a lot of logistics. You may have to hire subcontractors to support you in the project. You may have to obtain lines of credit or a small business loan in order to pay for some of the upfront costs so that you have the cash flow to complete the job. One of the things that seems to trip up a lot of small businesses is after they finish the job and they go to submit their invoices, government agencies are now using various online systems so that they can pay contractors by direct deposit. If you're not set up correctly to do that, it will extend the payment process quite a bit. Government agencies have basically 30 days to pay you, and then after that they have to pay you interest. The trouble is that 30-day clock doesn't start until you submit an approved and acceptable invoice. So you need to make sure you get that done correctly, and if it's done correctly with direct deposit, generally the payments occur very quickly. So some of the horror stories you may have heard in the past are really things of the past because so much of it is now automated. The other thing for federal contractors that you have to be careful of is that you have to be registered in a system called SAM. It stands for System for Award Management. And it is mandatory to be active in that system in order for the federal government to award you a contract, or if your registration expires while you're working on that contract, they can't pay you. SAM acts as a source document for paying contractors. And so if your registration goes inactive, and it has to be renewed every 12 months, but if it goes inactive while you're working on a contract, you've got to renew your registration before you can get paid. So those are just some of the things that you have to be careful of.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Mrs. Snyder?
The things that I've noticed that affect small business the most is detail to the specifications in the contract. If you don't read through what the government is asking for, a lot of times it'll bite you. And a lot of times it's not the big things that cause the most problems. It's more the little things. Did you submit the report on time? In construction, for example, the government requires you to submit submittals for critical components of the construction project. You're not supposed to order materials until you get a submittal approved. Doing those early in the system and early in the process can give you a lot of time at the end of the process. Another thing that I've noticed is I recommend patience trying to get a government contract. It's the federal government can be a bureaucratic beast, and that's why Mr. Clenard is amazing at helping people in the Small Business Development Center. We go out and seek small businesses to come and work on Shepherd, but getting through that labyrinth of bureaucratic problems that we get through can be challenging. So attention to the detail, read those things, understand them. We have a number of clauses that can get you into trouble very quickly if you do not follow the legal requirements of contracting with the federal government. So understand those. When you sign that contract, you're taking responsibility for that. And there's things that can go wrong if you're not aware that they're required.
Thanks, Mr. Snyder. Ma'am?
I think I failed to mention, but I work in the statewide procurement division at the comptroller's office. So our office goes through and I guess approves all the contracts through other state agencies. So one of the important things to remember is to look at the terms and conditions, as well as to keep in mind that there is a vendor performance evaluation that's going to be conducted on all contracts. So to make sure that you do a good job in filling out the requirements or whatever those terms and conditions of the contract are. And then again, what the gentleman had mentioned about looking to see as far as payment, to understand how the invoicing part goes, and if you're not registered, to get registered with the state of Texas comptroller's office, because to make sure that you get your check on time and things like that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to add something to what Mark said a minute ago. It does take a lot of patience. There's a lot of things you can do initially to be ready for when a contract does come up that you would really like to bid on. I've had a lot of folks that walk into my office and say, this contract opportunity is perfect for me. And I ask them when the bids are due, and they say 2 o'clock this afternoon. It's too late then. It's too late. There's a lot of preliminary things you need to do ahead of time. And registrations, certifications, and whatnot. But the other thing I wanted to stress, don't want to scare people away from government contracts. There are tremendous opportunities there. The federal government is the largest buyer of goods and services in the world. They spent over, I think, $440 billion last year. The state of Texas spent over $20 billion last year. So you can look at all the government agencies all across the area, and there are thousands of them. All of those could be potential customers for you. The thing is, you have to be ready to act when those opportunities present themselves. And they can be very financially beneficial. They can be very large contracts. They may be very small contracts. But there are a lot of opportunities out there. what we recommend to clients is not to put all their eggs in one basket. Have a balance of commercial activity as well as government activity, because there'll be ebbs and flows in both areas. And having that balance, that diversification, you might say, in your contractor base can make a huge difference in the long-term growth of your business.
Okay, thank you, sir. We've got about 5 minutes. I'll open up to questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, well, thank you to the panel members.
I was just going to ask, I went through the SAMS process and got my cage code, and we've bid on a couple mold remediation jobs, and in those situations, we get a packet that says exactly the outline of what we need, but there is no opportunity for on-site inspection. And I was just curious if that's something that's going to change in the future, or if that's something that's just set in stone.
You trying a site visit?
In our industry with water mitigation and fire mitigation, like usually we have to do a site visit, kind of see what the total protocols would be like on that, and in those situations we were not able to do site visits. So it's not something we felt comfortable bidding on without actually.
Okay. I recommend just come out and talk to Mr. Snyder. Do you have his card? We'll link up. I'll give you his card. And then I would recommend that, and here's one of the great things about, we provide education. If there's no contract on the street, solicitation out, you can just come in and we can just kind of talk to you very candidly about a way ahead. So I would recommend that you just set up an appointment to come out and talk to Mr. Snyder, and we can kind of walk you through it so that you can be better prepared in the future. Okay? Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you to the panel members, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to chair this. I really enjoyed it. Thanks. Have a nice day.